Allison.
Sugarland. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are here with Mary Smith again, and she is going to be talking to us tonight about pathological demand avoidance. We had a webinar with her several months back, and it was really good. So I am Allison Skalberg. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. I lead the Fort Bend ADDA SR Attention Deficit Disorder Association. This is a parent group for families who have a loved one with ADHD, ADD. We meet typically the last Tuesday of every month. We take a break in the summer around the holidays and stuff like that. But we meet by Zoom and we have a different speaker each month. So if you're not familiar with ADDASR, we want you to check them out because they do have an annual conference that's really good, and they bring speakers in from all across the country, authors and other things that have wrote about it. And it's a very great conference, so you'll want to check that out. You can join ADDASR. You're under no obligation to ever. But it's like $40 a year or something really small. So that can help. Pam Esser started ADDASR. I think it was like, oh, there it says since 1987. I was going to say it was a really long time ago. But so she started this organization with the idea of helping others with this disorder find the help and the resources that they need on their journey to help organize the chaos, which you're going to be talking to us about that tonight. So tonight's meeting is being recorded. Everybody who is signed up is going to get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording so you can listen to it after the fact. And all of our recordings live on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel after the fact, and you can catch that previous webinar that Mary did on pathological demand avoidance, because this is not a duplicate webinar. She's going to be expanding on what she talked about the first time. So if you didn't hear it the first time, you might want to go back and listen to it.
Yeah.
Also in that email, it will have, I believe there'll be an invite that if you wanted to join the organization, it will show you how you can go about doing that. So we are in webinar mode tonight, which means that we can't see you or hear you, but we know you're there, and we are glad that you're here with us tonight. And we do invite you to put your questions in the chat box as we're going through the presentation. If you're planning your busy evening tonight, we're going for an hour. So we start right on time and we'll end right on time as well. So thanks so much. And Mary, it's certainly a pleasure to have you back with us. And I'm going to turn everything over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Allison. It's really good to be back. So let's just get started. Again, my name is Mary Smith, and I transform burned out parents and support professionals into confident skill builders for neurodivergent kids. And my vision is that every child impacted by neurodivergence finds their most steadfast ally and their most compassionate teacher of life skills at home. Now, any strategy that you see here tonight is going to be one that was taken from my parent training course, Chaos Free Family. Today, I want to help you understand more about this concept of pathological demand avoidance, which we're going to call PDA for the entire rest of the presentation, okay? And I want to say that PDA is a very complex topic. And my intent with tonight's presentation is to get you started on a journey to learning more about it. We're going to talk about what the medical and mental health perspective of PDA is. We're going to talk about what research tells us with regard to the contributing factors, what it's like for the person who is exhibiting these behaviors. We're going to take a look at the cycle of escalation of that emotional dysregulation that comes with PDA. And I know that some of you yourselves are experiencing high levels of escalation at times, and that escalation may be turning physical. So I'm going to talk a bit about safety. And then we're going to finish up by helping you take these learnings and turning them into some practical and compassionate support for your family. PDA is a parent reported profile. It's primarily seen in people with autism. In fact, that's where they first noticed this pattern of behavior. But there's been studies where this same behavior pattern was observed in neurotypical teens and people with ADHD. Now, the central behavior is that avoidance of both simple and complex demands, right? So it's usually associated with that direct refusal to comply. But what is really hard to see is that even self-imposed demands like brushing your teeth before you go on a date or wanting to text a friend, these things can also induce that avoidant behavior. And in addition to this direct refusal that you see, this avoidance can come in the form of an elaborate excuse, a charm campaign, or fantasy scenarios. And the person with PDA might appear to be compliant in one setting, but be more avoidant in another. I liken this to like kids being compliant all day in school, and then they come home, and the first minor request we make, they just melt down and become dysregulated. Sometimes, when the person is aware of their avoidant behavior and they're trying not to do that, they will attempt to mask their dysregulation and can try to perform nonetheless. And when that pressure to perform becomes too much for them to manage, we'll often see this display of intense emotion, that emotional dysregulation, the meltdown, the shutdown. Now, research concludes that the underlying driver of this behavior is an intense need for autonomy. In fact, most people with this type of behavior challenge prefer for us to call it a pervasive drive for autonomy. Avoidant behavior is the feature of many mental health conditions, and currently we don't have enough evidence to show that PDA is a distinct, well validated disorder on its own. So you're not going to see PDA in the DSM-5 manual. Your care provider is not going to be able to give you a formal diagnosis of PDA. But I want you to know that this does not negate you or your child's experience with this behavioral challenge. Multiple studies have found an association between the exhibition of these PDA traits and anxiety, high levels of stress, a low tolerance for uncertainty, and trauma. And it appears to be a conditioned behavior that kind of grows over time. It doesn't start out this way. These factors are very common in autism, so demand avoidance may be an expression of that underlying anxiety and stress. And again, not a separate condition or pathology on its own. Demands for these people can feel very intense, threatening, or unpredictable. So avoidance often functions as a protective strategy to help them manage their anxiety and to regain some predictability. The concept of creating this whole pathology or this whole behavior profile around PDA has been criticized because people think it undermines the agency and the self advocacy of the person with these types of behaviors. One of the reasons that's cited for this criticism is that there's no research that has been done to study these behaviors from the perspective of the person with PDA. Now, autism researcher Damian Milton argues that avoidant behavior from a neurodivergent or autistic point of view, is a completely rational response to a highly stressful situation, meaning it's not intentional behavior. Here's some words that I use with my clients. If something makes me have intense, yucky feelings, I'm going to do things to get rid of those intense, yucky feelings. I mean, any human would do that, and every human does do that. Milton expands on his self protection point of view to explain why it's hard for people to see this behavior as rational and expected. And he calls it the double empathy problem. First thing we have to acknowledge with double empathy is that neurotypical and neurodivergent people experience the world in significantly different ways. Sensory input, social demands, changes in schedules, changes in routines, transitions from one activity to another, and uncertainty can be quite stressful for those with neurodivergence, including those with autism. And for neurotypicals, it's just another Tuesday. For a neurotypical, their default is it's not stressful for me, so it's probably not stressful for anyone else. And it's this cognitive limitation that makes it difficult to recognize the level of stress and anxiety the neurodivergent person is experiencing in any given situation. Let's take a look at an example, okay? We have neurodivergent child Eddie. He wonders why his parents are so fond of their grandfather clock that's in the living room. To himself, he wonders, how can anyone think with that constant ticking? And no one in the family ever notices that Eddie never plays or relaxes in the living room. When the family has guests over, he avoids coming in to the living room to visit with them where the clock is. And his parents, they see this as being rude and they start punishing him, not realizing how overwhelming the sound of that clock is for him. Now, neurotypicals uh, and neurodivergent people often misunderstand each other's words, our signals, our body language, our intentions. And even the simplest of phrases can create confusion. I'm going to give you another example. I had some parents tell me, I'm sorry that we're late to the session, but our son had a meltdown while we were getting ready. And it all started when we told him that he had his shoes on the wrong feet. The child immediately began to argue and cry. He appeared to refuse to put his shoes on the right feet. And the parents said it took him 15 minutes to realize the disconnection. In the child's mind, he was wearing the shoes they bought for him. They were his shoes on his feet. So, in his point of view, the shoes were on the correct set of feet. Sounds unplausible, but I'm telling you, this kind of disconnection happens every day. Sorry. Here we go. Now, these kinds of disconnection and misunderstanding, they leave the child feeling misunderstood, unsafe, or controlled, micromanaged. And this continued misattunement is what factors into their increased use of this extreme avoidance behavior. They're doing it as a way to cope or to escape that yucky feeling, that threat. And we wouldn't be here talking about PDA if it wasn't causing some problems at home, at school, at work, or in relationships. And it's easy for us to identify and describe our own feelings when we encounter PDA, But I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of how the person with PDA feels. You think you're making a simple request, but their brain is interpreting that request as a threat. You think you're making a simple suggestion for the comfort or improvement of a process, but they feel like they're losing their agency or their ability to choose. They hear responsibilities and they really do want to fulfill those responsibilities, but they can't find a way to make that yucky feeling or that feeling of threat subside so that they can initiate on those responsibilities. Now, over time, if they internalize this challenge, they begin to think, hey, the problem is with me. And you might see them cope in maladaptive or unhelpful ways. If they externalize this continued challenge, they're going to think, well, maybe the problem is with you. They're going to act out in an aggressive manner and also equally maladaptive ways. Now, you see poor behavior, but we're not appreciating what the person with PDA is feeling, right? That perceived threat, that spike in their anxiety. And so they engage their tools to protect themselves. Now, if you and your child have been trapped in this challenge for a while, it's easy to think that, hey man, all it takes is just the simplest of requests, the gentlest of stimulus, and it just sets off an instantaneous explosion. But I want to use this visual to make sure we can all see what's really happening here. Okay? Remember, PDA is not about whether the person wants to comply or not. It's a response to the perceived threat, right? That's creating these feelings of discomfort or being unsafe. The act of avoidance is that person's way of seeking to control or end that discomfort, to feel safe again, to bring some of that predictability back. And what generally happens is we as parents interpret this avoidance as disobedience, defiance, disrespect, and we begin to exert our authority in an attempt to control the child, control the situation, and control the outcome. And we generally try to do that by using incentives or threats of punishment. Of course, these efforts fail, and the outcome is a downward spiral into dysregulation, an increase in poor behavior, and a negative impact on the relationship between the parent and the child. So, like Allison said, if you want to learn more about why rewards and punishment don't work for neurodivergent brains, you can look up that webinar I did for at a Southwest region last September. I think that was the month I did it. So, if we want to work on stopping this behavior of this avoidant behavior, the first thing we need to do is lower the reactivity in the relationship and the environment. And parents, we have to start with you. You're the foundation and the model for your child when it comes to them learning how to self regulate. So, in the short term, you're just going to work on regulating yourself. Now, at this point, you're still going to see that escalation in your child after the request. You're going to see that yuck feeling. Okay. Our goal here is to not feed into that escalation or that anxiety that they're feeling. Remember, their response to the request has more to do with how their brain is interpreting that request as a threat. Okay. And they need to protect themselves. It really has nothing to do with you. It's not disrespect or defiance. It's a conditioned response to cope with that perceived threat. And what you see or hear from them is that discomfort leaving their body. It's their attempts to try to cope with these feelings. What this means is that you don't need to engage in that response. Focus on finding your own sense of calm by remembering this is not disobedient behavior. This is dysregulated behavior. And I cannot control my child or the situation. I can only influence it. So I want you to seek to understand what your child is feeling. Did they lose their sense of agency? Did they feel the pressure of a really fast transition? Did they feel like this process was unsafe or unpredictable? And then help them make adjustments to quell those feelings. Now, here's another example. You need your child to get off electronics and take a shower. Now, you make the request and you're met with avoidance in the form of negotiating for extra time. And when you don't allow that extra time, your child throws the game controller at you. Now, in the past, you would react by raising your voice and telling them, if you don't get in there and take that shower now, you're not getting a snack before bed and you're going to be grounded for a week from electronics. Well, now you're fighting back. And in their brain, they're thinking, well, maybe that perception of a threat was reality. Maybe there really was something to be afraid of. So I'm suggesting that you give your child space to experience that initial feeling of threat and take the time to take the temperature way down. Give them back some autonomy or control. You could ask them, hey, do you want to get off in 1 minute or 2 minutes? Do you want to take a shower in my bathroom or your bathroom? Do you want a snack now or do you want to wait until after your shower? Again, this is to use in the short term while you practice your own self regulation. The goal here is to move away from trying to control that situation like you might have in the past with rewards and punishments. And you're going to learn to adjust your demands by offering some flexible choices. Now, I'm not telling you that you have to change what the demands are. I'm offering you the first step in helping your child reduce that PDA reactivity. And the first step is modifying the way you deliver the demand and the way you respond to their avoidance. Now, many families observe that the child becomes less reactive when the parent is able to become less reactive. Now, another adjustment you can make is to consider using a different transition process with your child. Now, there's two parallel tracks going on here. The blue one for the parent and the red one for the child. I want you to listen carefully here because you need to explain and role play, practice this process with your child before you actually use it. And we have to do this because we're trying to let them know where their autonomy comes and to make this process predictable to them. And that will help us bring down this avoidance behavior. Parents, the first step is to get with your child in their general presence and gently interrupt their focus by telling them, find a place to stop. Please find a place to stop. You're not going to be yelling at them from the other room. You're going to be right there with them so you can talk calmly and gently. Make sure this is a clear and directive statement. Don't say things like, hey man, in about 5 or 10 minutes, I need you to stop and come do something for me. Because to your child's brain, that means you don't have to do anything for 5 or 10 minutes. And most kids are not good at judging time when they're focused on having fun. So you're just setting them up to fail. These are the words you're going to use. Find a place to stop. Now, your child should be thinking to themselves, All right, I got to find this place to stop and I can come back to this later. Might be this evening, might be tomorrow. And then they need to start working on finding a good place to stop for themselves. Now, for younger children, I sometimes suggest that parents, before the activity actually starts, help them identify what the good stopping places are going to be, like hitting the pause button on a video or putting together 5 more Legos. Okay. Now, you're going to give them some space to deal with this perceived threat, and it's also going to keep you from engaging in that response. So just go ahead and put some space between you. Now, when you come back in that couple of minutes, just announce you need their attention and don't say anything further. Don't give your instructions just yet. We're going to wait for your child to put their hands down and their eyes up on you. That's their signal that they're ready to listen. Okay. Now, your child is learning a new pattern of behavior, so this isn't going to be magic the first few times. So don't get frustrated and create a perceived threat. If you come back in that couple of minutes and they're not quite ready yet, just stand there, repeat every 30 seconds. Don't rush them. That, hey, I need you to be off of that. Hey, I need you to be prepared to do this other activity. Okay. Again, keeping your voice as low energy as possible. Now, when their hands are down and their eyes are up, you're going to give your instructions with them listening. And you're going to ask them to tell you when they finish that task. Now, parents, you need to remain present enough to see your child physically engage in this new task. Once they do, then you can relax. Here's an example. You ask your child to get off of video games to go take out the trash, take it to the curb. You want to stay present until you see them really walk away from that video game, walk to the garage, put their hands on the garbage can. All right? Then you're pretty good to go. Now, when they return to you and they tell you, hey, I've finished, we want to recognize them with some full positive recognition. Okay? Thank you for getting off of your video game and taking out the trash for me. Now you are free to either go back to that game or to go do anything else you want. So we want to tell them what's the behavior that they did, what was the task they achieved, and now that they've been successful, what is open to them. Again, make sure that you talk about this process with your child and you do a practice or a role play with them. Make it predictable. Now, here's some things to remember to make this strategy work well. Again, no yelling from one room to the other. You got to be in their presence. What happens when we're trying to yell across the house is we naturally have to raise our voice. When we raise our voice, the tenor in our voice changes, and that can be threat provoking. Okay, so we want to be in there gently, volume wise, just talk to them in a normal tone of voice. Hey, I need to find that place to stop. There's always some level of dysregulation with breaking of hyperfocus. I'm 60, almost 61 years old. When my husband comes in here and breaks my hyperfocus in my office, there is a level of discomfort that I have to move through. Okay, this is common for us. You have to remember that that discomfort that you're seeing has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them learning how to emotionally regulate through a transition. I want you to remember you can't tell how deep my focus is by looking at me. It may look like I'm just walking through the living room doing nothing. I could be really intently focused on something. And just because you're ready doesn't mean I'm ready. Make sure you're giving your child time for those yucky feelings to subside and so that they can process finding a stopping place. These are magic words. You're going to say, find a place to stop, or please find a place to stop. And then you're going to give them a few minutes, couple of minutes to find their own stopping place. This provides them that autonomy. And when they know that's how it's going to happen, that's predictability. A lot of parents think, well, I'm going to be compassionate. I'm going to be gentler and I'm going to give them 5 or 10 minutes. That's actually not compassionate at all. 5 minutes gives me time to break my hyperfocus. I'm going to look around. Nobody's there. I don't know what to do next. I'll just go back to what I was doing. And then the next thing you know, I'm right back in that hyperfocus. So again, find a place to stop, couple of minutes. Now, go back and engage with them. Now, I remember the exhaustion that I felt when I was raising my two sons with ADHD. And so many mornings I woke up and just wanted things to be different. And the hard truth is that that magical day is not coming where they just wake up knowing how to self-regulate and to perform effortful, boring tasks. These are skills that must be taught and learned, and our children have to be given the opportunity to practice these skills to improve them. Long-term behavioral change and skill development is a journey that we have to walk every day. Some of those days are going to be easier than others, but this means long-term change takes time and stamina to achieve. So, when your reactivity starts to come down, and I don't mean that it's going to disappear, let's say if you're coming in at about a 10 right now, let's work on getting you to a 5. And when you get to that 5, we're going to focus on building a sense of internal motivation that nourishes our child for this long journey. We need to build a sense of motivation that decreases the child's anxiety and promotes ownership and well-being. Now, you're probably thinking right now, hey, Mary, if we can't use rewards and punishment, how are we supposed to create motivation? Let me introduce you to a different motivational framework called self-determination theory. Self-determination theory observes that people have this innate tendency towards growth, meaning we're already motivated to improve and perform. We have to find a way to nurture this inherent motivation in our child. This theory recognizes that humans, not just neurodivergent humans, all humans, have a set of internal motives made up of our psychological needs, our cognitions, that's how we learn and process information around us, and our emotions. And it's these internal motives that act as mediators between our external triggers or stimulus and the behavior or performance. The satisfaction of these internal motives is what gives our behavior direction, energy, and persistence. Motivation. Okay. So, in other words, it's not about what I get in return for doing a task or the punishment that I avoid. I'm motivated by having my personal needs met. Now, these innate needs are relatedness, autonomy, and competence. A part of self-determination theory argues that a sense of well-being and motivation are fueled by the satisfaction of these three needs. Again, it doesn't just apply to neurodivergent humans, all humans, regardless of their demographic, their upbringing, their socioeconomic status, where their country of origin, it doesn't matter. All humans, same thing. And when these needs are met in the environment or the process that's being used, motivation increases and becomes more internalized. And I want to say right here at the beginning, we get the good results by meeting all three needs, not just focusing on one or two. So let's look at relatedness. This is the need that we have to care for others and to feel cared for in return, that someone's on our side, they're in it with us. Sometimes when parents come to me for help, I'll sense this disconnect between the issues that they're having and the fact that their neurodivergent child learns, regulates, and behaves differently than neurotypical children. So, relatedness is where we're going to address that misattunement between neurodivergent and neurotypical. And I will tell you this, we also address misattunement between neurodivergent and different neurodivergent. Okay. Parents should learn all they can about their child's neurodivergence, including PDA behaviors if that's appropriate. Now, relatedness means you always place your child's mental well being above their performance. A few ways to do this is to become more aware of how and what you're asking your child to do and how that request is being received or perceived. Consider how much information and stimuli they're processing when you're making this request. And you may find it helpful to use indirect communication so that your request doesn't sound like a harsh command. Okay? An example might be your child comes in to the kitchen Saturday morning and says, "Hey, will you take me to the movies today?" Now, your indirect request, because you know that the bedrooms have to be cleaned before we think about doing anything fun. So, an indirect way to answer this would be yes, I can take you to the movies today, but we need to clean our rooms before we go. I'm going to start on mine now. When are you going to start on yours? Okay? Again, we're in it together. We're saying what the expectation is. We have to clean the rooms before we can go. But what do they hear first? Yeah, we're going. Okay, we just got to do this thing first, right? We also say, I'm going to start mine now, very indirect sort of persuasion. When are you going to start? Again, giving them credit. I know you're going to do it. So that's a good way to use some indirect communication. Now, the need for autonomy is that need to experience learning and the performance of a task as a freely chosen and volitional act. Now, some parents react really strongly to this word because they think I'm about to transfer all the authority to the child and just let them go feral. Okay, that's not what this is. For right now, I want you to think of autonomy as just being the opposite of micromanagement and control. When our child is highly reactive or resistant, it's important that we enter their space as gently as possible. We want to create as little activation to their anxiety as possible so they can be thinking, how am I going to do this? All right. Now, is it going to be no reactivity? No. But we need to be focused on being as gentle as possible. We want to offer flexible and collaborative options to allow them to have some control over what's happening. Remember, in that transition process, we let them decide, you want to start in 1 minute or two? Okay, that process will work really good here too. Now, another way to allow autonomy is to give instructions with clearly defined expectations. Here's an example. Hey, bud, you need to clean your room before you start playing video games with your friends today. This means bed made, floor vacuumed, and laundry done. How do you want to achieve that today? Now, the child might say they want to start with laundry, then vacuum, then make the bed last. They may even tell you, I want to do my laundry, then I want to take a break, then I want to vacuum, then I want to take a break, and then I want to make the bed last, right? And take a break. As long as that break isn't playing video games with their friends, I think you're okay. They will have met their expectations and been able to exercise some autonomy in doing that. The most important thing when giving your child autonomy is to provide clearly defined boundaries and expectations. Never assume that they know it or they remember it. I encourage my clients to always write it down. This is what a clean room is. This is what a clean playroom is. This is what a morning routine is. This is how you get ready for bed. Write these expectations down for them. Now, the last of these needs is this sense of competence, that feeling that you're skillful and effective in your activities and environment. Hear me, parents. The child doesn't have to actually be good at something. All right. They just need to feel as though they're doing okay. All right. Now, one of the ways you can start to build this sense of competence is to give them plenty of time to process what you're asking and organize their plan to comply. If they feel rushed, they're going to feel threatened and they're going to get off to a bad start that you're going to be hard pressed to recover from. Okay. Setting realistic expectations can be tricky when you have inconsistent avoidance. So, unrealistic doesn't necessarily mean that you've set the bar too high for each particular task you're asking them to do. A lot of times it means that you haven't helped your child develop an effective process to meet that expectation, or that we removed support before they were able to become consistent in that process. Now, in the case of PDA, unrealistic expectations arise when neurotypicals fail to realize how not simple a task really is. So be sure to consider anxiety, sensory overwhelm, stress, uncertainty, and past trauma when you're making these requests. I typically ask parents to think about their child's history with the task. Does this request usually end in a meltdown or shutdown? And what I typically hear is, look, Mary, they can do it. I've seen them do it. But yeah, there's usually a big to do about it before they get started. And so I ask, if that's the usual outcome, why are you expecting it to change by doing the same thing? That's what's unrealistic. I work with families to create new processes for completing those tasks. I get parents to set realistic expectations, work with the child to develop a process to meet those expectations, and then we talk about how is the parent and child going to interact? What's the dynamic going to be as the parents support this process and hold accountability for it to get done? And above all, highlight the things that are improving and going better. Your child needs to know that we're not working on this because I'm not getting it right. We're working on it because things are getting better. Now, I know a lot of you tuned in tonight to hear advice on what to do when situations escalate and become physical. That aggression can be scary and isolating. So it's important to work on addressing the contributing factors instead of just focusing on what to do when things go sideways. But if violence occurs, the first thing you need to do is regulate the environment. Give your child some space. It's not time to teach, it's not time to hand out consequences. Remember, we're just not doing that anymore. This is the time to get really quiet for your child. Give them less to need to process. Move everyone, including you, away from your child to keep from adding to that perception of threat. Move objects that could be used to hurt someone out of reach and try to hold your body in a non-threatening stance. Okay? They're already in overwhelm, so we don't want to add more to what they're trying to process. Just keep your verbal engagement to a bare minimum and talk in a neutral tone. Right? Once you've regulated the environment, now we need to focus on regulating your own behavior and presence. Remember, this is not about you. It's about how their brain is perceiving these requests or demands as threats. Acknowledge that you're not going to be able to control your child or this situation. You can only influence the outcome here. Don't rush your child to calm down. Just wait, okay? Rushing is pressure, it's more anxiety. If you're not engaging and not adding to that anxiety, they have a chance of settling down much quicker. Try to figure out what happened, what triggered this response. What did they feel was threatened? Their sense of calm, their autonomy, their predictability in the situation? Was it a hard transition? And then use a flexible approach to offer choices that could give them some autonomy or predictability. Now, a common mistake that parents make is to consider the return to peace and quiet to be the end of the incident. It's connection or that relatedness that actually reduces future aggression. So after the incident, when everyone is back to calm, and I mean like an hour or two after, we need to repair the relationship. Hear me, parents. This is not making your child apologize for what happened. Remember, this was a rational response to a perceived threat from their point of view. This reconnection time, that's the time to say, man, that was really hard. Let's work together to make things different for next time. Help your child reflect on what went wrong without shame, and then help them solve this problem collaboratively. This is what's going to build trust and teach them some skills at the same time. It also provides some more predictability. Now, in case you are unable to de-escalate the situation and you fear for the safety of yourself or other family members, you need to follow your pre-planned exit strategy or to get to a safe room in the house. You might consider calling 911. If you fear for the safety of your child, like they may hurt themselves, consider calling 911 again or calling a mental health crisis line. I know it can be hard for you to ask for help, but you don't have to do this alone. Consider some support, okay? Get help for yourself first. This is stressful for you. Work with a coach, a therapist, a physician, but help yourself, okay? Learn more what to do, learn more about how to control your own reactivity. Occupational therapists can be very helpful in helping with that sensory overload and learning some calming techniques for regulation. Behavioral specialists can help also, but I don't recommend ABA therapy because depending on the practitioner, this approach can include a lot of rewards and punishments. Family therapists familiar with neurodivergence can help. Don't be afraid to ask where they got their neurodivergence training and make sure they have training and experience in your child's brand of neurodivergence. You don't really want somebody as, yeah, I've had some autistic clients. Yeah, I've worked with some neurodivergent people. That's not what you want. You want people who have been trained to work with neurodivergent people. Look for professionals that use collaborative approaches between parents and child. And trauma-informed care is also very helpful sometimes in helping reduce that reactivity for parents and for child. There are a couple of support organizations for PDA. One is PDA North America, and that's their website, pdanorthamerica.org. And then there's PDA Society of the UK. That organization is at pdasociety.org.uk. All right. So um, I've got time for questions. So, Allison, what are people talking about in the chat?
We had one lady that said, I found I was dealing with this a lot with my son, and I found that giving him a choice or making requests in a less direct manner made a big difference. For example, and you were talking about this, instead of saying, put your clothes on, if I say your clothes are on the chair, when you're ready to get dressed, he would go over there and get dressed because he felt like he was choosing to do that. And I used to always tell, I used to always say to my kids, life is about choices. You can make good
Hmm.
choices, you can make bad choices. All people, life is about choices. And I really found would you like this or that? What sounds better to you? Like those choices really do make a difference. And I definitely have a kid that fits the bill for this. And
Yeah.
it is hard and frustrating. But the calmer you stay, the more you seem like you're on their side, the more cooperative they are. That's all there is to it.
Absolutely. Autonomy is everything. It's actually a component of building a relationship with your child, is trusting them with a little bit of autonomy. Just to, I say a couple of times in there, this is not just about neurodivergent people, it's also about humans.
Humans.
Just think about after the pandemic, when everybody was asked to go back to the office and how people didn't want to go back to the office. And people said, oh, people just don't want to work. That wasn't the case. They had enjoyed their autonomy in their home office, fulfilling everyone's expectations kind of on their own terms. If they wanted to eat ice cream at 10 o'clock, they did it, right? If they wanted to walk around the block a bit, they did it, but they got that work done. So again, autonomy is a really key piece of trying to lower that reactivity. And I'm glad that that parent was able to experience that and lean into that. I'm sure their child was happy too.
I think that's really good. So I think what I want to close with is how do people, I know everybody's going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording.
Yeah,
You offer free consultations, so I know that you offer tailored solutions to specific families.
yeah.
Tell me about how that works if somebody wanted to engage with you a little bit further.
Sure, there's a contact page out on my website, chaosfreeadhd.com. I will tell you right now that it is probably better for you to email me because my practice is very full, but I want to be responsive to the people who showed up to this conference, to this presentation today. So, if you have a child that's young and you want to use my suggested coach, her name is Jennifer Presley. You can schedule a session with her. If you just feel like, Mary, we know you, we want to work with you, email me at mary@chaosfree.com and I'll set you up and we can do a discovery session. Okay. Just to correct one thing, it's a minor correction. We charge $75 for these introductory sessions, but if parents come on with us for services, that's credited back to their account.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Okay. One person says, I think a big part of it, especially if they have communication challenges, they feel like they don't have a lot of autonomy, and everybody's making decisions for them. So they may feel like they're getting bossed around or micromanaged. That,
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think when a child is has slower processing speed and they're having trouble communicating, a lot of people want to finish their sentence for them. And they start to feel rushed, and they do. They lose their autonomy. Why are people speaking for me just because I'm not speaking fast? So again, giving them that time to process information instead of just needing to have this conversation go lickety split is very helpful and calming for them.
and one thing that, is true is, they have fast brains and some things are running fast and lickety split, like you said, but other things, many of our kids truly have processing speed delays, working memory issues, and other things. Giving that space and that time and remembering that it's still processing, I mean, it's important for sure.
Exactly. Neurodivergence is all about that asynchronous development, right? I can be really smart, have a high IQ, but emotionally, socially, not be really adept at handling one-on-one situations or situations in public. If I have a communication delay or a learning disability like dyslexia, I'm I know what I want to say, but it's taking me some time to get it out. I know what I just read, but it's taking me some time to process that. And so if you don't rush me, I'll be right there with you.
That's good. That is good.
Okay?
Well, Mary, it has certainly been our pleasure being here with you tonight. You provide a lot of great information and tips, and honestly, just encouragement. And because
Yeah.
in the chaos of the day, in the life, and the meltdown, and the plate
Yeah.
that was thrown on the floor, and the other things that truly happen, it's good to take a step back and hear this and remind ourselves of how we want to be, where we want to be, and how we want to help them rise. That's the end goal with our kids is we want them to be the best that they can be and help them rise. And I think these are truly tools that we can use to help achieve that goal. So thank you for that. So, guys,
Absolutely.
it's been wonderful being here with you tonight. Everybody's going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording. You'll check your email for that. They'll probably come out tomorrow. And again, this webinar will live on our YouTube channel after the fact. So, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming back and chatting with us about this tonight, Mary.
You
Really,
bet.
really good information. Certainly our pleasure. And we'll look forward to connecting it with everybody again soon.
Great. Thank you all for
Thank
attending.
you. Take care.
Bye bye, Allison.
Bye now.